Well, GM everybody. I know it's after lunch and everybody is still digesting, but I hope you can manage to participate. And yeah, so I'm here to talk about Astar and our journey from Tokyo to the world. But yeah, first maybe about me, because this is funny enough also my very first Polkadot event. But I've been in crypto since 2018, mostly in marketing, community, and sales. And yeah, now at Astar Network since April. And I am really into NFTs, as you can see. Unfortunately, it's not on Polkadot. It's, I must admit, on Ethereum. But you know, I'm working on getting them to go multi-chain. And I'm also way too much on crypto Twitter. I guess many people can relate. But yeah, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear Japan? Like, I mean, you can just shout it in the room. Yes, of course, that was in the title. That's very creative. Food, yes, good one. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, so I mean, obviously there's a few things that could come to mind. One of them is, I don't know if anybody else here watches a lot of anime, but my friends and I, we do a anime Demon Slayer watch party every Sunday these days. Then, of course, gaming is another big one that might come to mind. For people who are more, well, into Japan, they might even mention the convenience store, because I think you've never experienced a really convenient convenience store until you've been in Japan. Of course, Tokyo, if you're into cars that are not Lamborghinis, cars could be one. Toyota is still one of the biggest exporters, and food. And so the theme of this is exports that were really successful made in Japan. And of course, one of the first ones is anime and manga. There are 2.8 billion people watching it worldwide. It's probably more than using blockchain on a monthly basis. And the market is projected to grow pretty fast and pretty big in the next few years. And I mean, yeah, just one single movie can rake up to 29 million viewers, so that's not bad. And of course, another export that comes kind of with that is the otaku culture, which used to describe something more negative. But now, thanks to the export success, people have become to proudly associate themselves as otaku and carry that with them. Another one could be food. And I guess every city nowadays has a Japanese restaurant. Teriyaki sauce is everywhere. And franchise like Nobu help that. Maybe not a good location for a first date, though. And of course, there's a lot of Netflix series you shouldn't watch when you're hungry. So now would actually be a good moment to watch something like Jiro Stream of Sushi, or Midnight Diner, or Samurai Gourmet. And then, of course, Astar Network. So we're still work in progress. That's why it says loading up there. But we are already the #1 blockchain in Japan, and our Japanese entity has over 45 companies and corporates from all kinds of industries, even from government, as part of their consortium to explore using Web3 in their business. And we also ran a campaign with more than 400 companies in Japan and the biggest newspaper, pushing the message to make Japan #1 again. And that is not just related to any blockchain ecosystem, but more broadly about positioning Japan as an innovation hub again. And yeah, maybe a bit of the story of Astar. So we started out as a scaling solution for Polkadot, but quickly realized that there was another, well, lacking part, and it was smart contracts. So that's how we pivoted to becoming a smart contract hub, and now we are working on recently launched Smart Contracts 2.0 so that you can write smart contracts that can interact with Substrate and with EVM chains. And well, one of the things that our founder was really passionate about when he started Astar wasn't necessarily just using the technology for the technology's sake, but gaining influence and coming up with mechanisms that can empower good in the world. And so we came up with dApp staking, which is a mechanism to enable people to support their favorite dApps by staking their tokens with them. And eventually it could turn into a mechanism to even fund things like in the DeSci sector or other public goods. And we have very strong ties in Japan, and mostly Web3 projects, they tend to market very heavily like internationally, and everything is in English, and you just try to target everybody. But we went the other route and started really heavily focusing on building our ties in Japan and growing from there. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of reason for that, and Japan is becoming more and more interesting as a place for Web3 companies to do the business. So for example, I don't know if you've heard of it, but they recently started a Web3 office, and that sits directly under the Ministry for Trade and Economics, and this is aimed at exploring what you can do with Web3 as a government agency. And then they also have a Cool Japan initiative, which, okay, the name is maybe not so cool, but they are trying to explore innovation and also suggest some changes to the existing tax regime, which is pretty, well, it wasn't really friendly for crypto companies because you had to pay taxes on unrealized gains, and obviously the unrealized losses didn't help you, so it wasn't a good setup, but they're now changing it towards a system where potentially you just have to pay taxes on any gains that you actually cash into fiat money. And they also have now a DAO law where DAOs are pretty much treated like limited liability companies, which provides some clarity for anybody trying to set up a DAO in that world. And I think it was last Friday, MUFG, the biggest bank in Japan, has said that they are going to launch a stablecoin. And on top of that, the Japanese government has taken back its ban on stablecoins, which is issued after the UST collapse, and seems to be more open now to accept stablecoins that are not backed by the Japanese yen. So there's a lot of things that are slowly but surely loosening up. Then for people who like to hang out in the metaverse, they even have a metaverse economic zone now, which is 10 big corporates that came together to explore the metaverse and things like how you can use it to market, how you can use it to potentially support a work style changes. So maybe we work in the metaverse instead of just in your home office. Another part of it is interoperability, so building a metaverse where all these companies can interoperate, share data together, and obviously the financial corporations inside of this are more interested in the digital identity and compliance part. And what else? I think another big interesting part is the Japanese collector culture. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Japan, but if you go to Japan and you go into Akihabara, for example, or into Nakano Broadway, which is like the secret alpha here, if you're an otaku, you can go into shops that are stacked full of collectibles, and they are not even first-hand, they're second-hand. And this runs really deep. Everybody there starts collecting things. I mean, even with payment solutions, they now have like over 15, and everybody has all of them. And it is also reflected in the NFT scene. So people in Japan are very well known as so-called diamond hands because they buy the NFT and they hold it. And usually they don't sell, which has led to the interesting thing that most of the floor prices didn't collapse as much as we've seen in the Western world. And if you're in Tokyo, on any given day, you can probably go and join an NFT event, or at least like a small dinner of people who hold a certain NFT. Then there's, of course, also an openness to new technology. I think Japan is well known for that and has always explored things like VR and AR. And another thing is that VTubers are pretty popular. So I don't think they're very popular here yet, but more and more people are exploring using like a digital version of themselves, or maybe an entirely different character to stream in games. And I think they might be ahead of us in that. And then they also have the Gambaru spirit, which is especially reflected in artists. And the gaman, which means like staying resilient and kind of sticking with your project even through hard times. And what's also interesting is that we have a lot more small projects. So people start a project and they don't even aim to go global. They just decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to have this project, and maybe it's just my region, maybe it's just the city I'm in. and then they build something, and a lot of the times it's related to like having real life ties to the people and actual meetups, and yeah, so there's quite a different scene happening there. And yeah, but obviously it's not so easy to go into Japan if you are a project and you want to start. I think does anybody here speak Japanese? Yeah, so I mean maybe like some words you've learned in Naruto, but apart from that, it will not bring you very far if you are trying to do business. So the language is one of the biggest challenges, also because Japanese English proficiency ranks like 80th of 112 countries according to Education First, and it's like low proficiency. So that means chances are that you might encounter somebody whose English is not that fluent if you try to do business there. Another challenge is obviously the business culture. I mean, accepting the name card only with 2 hands is still one of the things that are pretty easy to understand, but then there's like a whole vast plethora of other things to consider. And yeah, what's also interesting is there's a lot of bureaucracy. I mean, I thought Germany was bad, but Japan is actually also bad, because when I was living there, they still required you to have a name stamp. This means you have to go somewhere, you need to get a stamp with your name so that you can sign papers. Now I think they've digitized it, but it's still very reliant on paperwork, and if you come there as a foreigner, it's pretty intimidating, to say the least, and it can take a long time to get through all the processes. And then another part is the users. Japanese are pretty sensitive when it comes to user experience, and they have high expectations. So what happens is that most projects will only launch when they're 100% sure that their product is okay. And there's not so much people who would do a beta test and say, hey, we're going to launch this even though we're not really sure it's going to work or it still has a lot of bugs. So there's quite a different mindset in that regard. And that's something to be aware of, because if you launch too soon and then you have all these challenges in your product and people might interpret it in the wrong way, then you have lost trust before you even really started. So yeah, those are a few of the challenges, but you know, nothing that's worth it comes without challenges. So you know, you don't win alone. That's just how it is, and this is a quote from Haikyuu. It's a volleyball anime, if you're interested in those. But yeah, so that's why we say let's do it together, and Astar is interested in obviously facilitating innovation in all of Japan and bringing into international projects, because we see a huge opportunity there. And why Astar? Well, because first of all, we are a go-to-market chain in Japan, and we already work with a lot of enterprise partners, and we have the understanding of what they need and the existing connections, because as so often, you need connections to get into those huge conglomerates. Of course, we also have bilingual talent like myself who can help you speak Japanese, speak Spanish, speak German, whatever language you want to get in. We've worked with some big artists like Yoshitaka Amano, who is known for his works in Final Fantasy. And we also recently announced a partnership with JR Kyushu. So JR is one of the biggest railway companies in Japan, and you know that Japanese people love trains beyond anything. So if you ever want to have fun in Japan, just try to photograph all the trains there are. I think you will need quite a few weeks. And we also previously, we distributed a NFT with Tokyo Train Company, which is another one of the train companies, and people lined up for those. So it's quite a successful use case just to give people an NFT of trains at the moment. But yeah, so those are a few of the reasons. And obviously another one also on the slide here is our CEO, Sota Watanabe. He's very well connected in Japan. He is very well recognized, as you can see. He was also on the Forbes cover, I think already twice by now, and was one of the 30 under 30 in Asia. And he's part of all these government discussions to try to get a more, well, open and crypto-friendly framework established in Japan. And yeah, so that's all from my side for today. because I wouldn't want to give it all away, all the alpha. You will have to reach out to us for all more details. But if you have any questions about the Japanese market, about Astar, about what we're trying to achieve, feel free to hit me up. And yeah, you can also scan this code. It will go to our Contact Us page, so that's the official channel. Or you can find me, and then you can ask me directly. Thank you.